It's Winky Wednesday, and we are talking all things San Francisco 49ers with the voice of the fan. We're talking Brock Purdy, his injury, Kyle Shanahan, the future of him, and some standouts from Monday night's football game. All right here on Locked On 49ers. Let's go.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On 49ers. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And of course, it's Wednesday. So we got Nicholas Winkler, the voice of the fan, on today. But first, I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And speaking of sports book, I saw some guys that put some money on certain players to do some good things. Jared Goff, Gibbs, Brock Purdy threw for a ton of yards, 377 yards, 4 total touchdowns by him. He did some really good things, but obviously the 49ers weren't able to come up with a win. So, Wink, when you watch Brock Purdy, we'll talk about the injury. We'll talk about the elbow moving forward. It was kind of a tale of two halves. Started out hot, sharp. I don't even know if he threw an incomplete pass in the first half. Maybe one incompletion in the first half. He was money. Kyle was money. But what were your thoughts on his performance from the first half? We'll discuss that first.
I mean, it was fun to watch, right? I mean, that's the Purdy we fell in love with last season. And at times this season, you kind of saw glimpses of that Purdy. So when you're watching that, you're like, yeah, where's this been all year? Oh, the timing is perfect. And the play calls from Shanahan, like he was dialing up some masterpieces. And I think maybe he was doing that from a place of kind of relaxation, right? There's no stress in this game. Like he wasn't trying to go out and he didn't have to go win this game, right? He obviously wanted to win this game. He wants his overall record to go up. But the play calling just looked real old school Kyle, really like, oh, I'm going to show you how to really ride up the play, and then I'm going to use that play to do this play later. And I feel like that's something that he maybe got a little bit away from this year. And it allowed Brock Purdy to really be free out there and really, go through his checkdowns and this and that. And I thought Brock Purdy played fantastic in the first half. You're watching it, you're like, okay, maybe I could go up to 45, maybe 50 million a year. Like you're starting to think like, okay, I get it. I get what they're talking about, because me, I've been like, don't go above 40. That's going to be crazy talk. So you start seeing that and you're like, oh, dang. Okay, Brocky's finding Pearsall. They were getting Debo involved. I mean, it looked like a really awesome first half. And as a 49er fan, you're like, okay, all right, I love this team. But then they played the second half and it didn't quite look as good.
I think the first half is the version of Brock that most people want to continue to see, right? I mean, just on time and really doing a great job of facilitating in the offense. There's this kind of negative content text around the word game manager, but I think he was doing a great job of being a game manager. And part of being a game manager, and Alex Smith could talk about this as well, your number one thing is just to not lose the game. Don't do anything to lose the game. You don't have to go out and win the game. We're not going to put the game on your shoulders, but make the throws you're supposed to make. Don't make some boneheaded throws and don't do anything. Put your team in a bad situation. And early on, I thought Kyle did a really good job with the misdirection. And I don't know if he had the misdirection going on because this offensive line, I can't just have my franchise quarterback dropping straight back with guys able to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. Not sure how worried about Detroit Lions defense he was. I mean, this is a defense that's really been spiraling. They have 15 plus guys on IR just on the defense alone. So they're not playing good football. They're giving up a ton of points, and their offense has to score a bunch of points really just to keep up with teams as they tried to do yesterday, or eventually they did against the 49ers. But with Brock Purdy, he was doing a good job. He's seeing it, misdirection. Okay, I got George Kittle in the flat. Boom. Hit him. He does a great job of running after catch. Some big windows. They did a terrific job. There was one play with Ricky Pearsall where they motioned him from the right to the left, and before he could even get set, boom, snap the ball. Now you get a defender that's off, and Pearsall did a great job running, getting on the toes of the defender, breaking that route off, and that was the one where he stuck that one hand out, caught it on the sideline. Everything was working the way that the 49ers wanted it to, but then you talk about the second half, and even the second half started out good. 49ers had a touchdown early on, But the more the game started kind of getting tight, and it's like, hey, you can't stop scoring. You have to keep up with this Lions team. And oh, by the way, your kicker, Jake Moody, he is not helping you. He's missing kicks. He's not helping you in the situation. Brock, you got to be the guy that's going to help get us over the top just a little bit. And the one thing you can't do is turn the ball over. And he did it not once, but twice. On the first one, he just overshot the receiver. I was wondering if, like, did he need him to break his route off a little different? Was he in the right spot? Sometimes those are things you don't quite know with the timing of a quarterback and receiver. But the ball got away from him, sailed on him, picked off. He actually threw another interception where they called PI. And I remember seeing the location of the ball, and I'm like, I'm glad they called PI because get to that regardless. And safety made a diving interception. And then, later in the game, obviously, we saw the fourth quarter interception where he does not see the safety. So we'll get to that play in particular. But just your thoughts on the two versions of Brock Purdy and how do you like compartmentalize, which guy he's going to be consistently for the 49ers moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, you saw why you would want to franchise this guy, right? Why you'd want to give him 5, 6, 7 year quarterback in the first half. You're like, yes, this is Brock Purdy. He knows exactly what Kyle expects of him. He knows exactly where his guys are going to be. He knows the timing. He knows, when he needs to get out of the pocket, he gets out of the pocket. When he needs to run, he runs. I mean, he looked like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL in the first half, but then the second half happened. And of course, that first drive, great. You're like, yeah, here we go. Let's just keep this rolling. Let's go score 50. This is the 49er offense we've been waiting for all year. And the problem with Brock being what you've been called, not you didn't say it, but you said people call him a game manager. Well, that works if you have a great defense, which the 49ers have had for a long time. They don't have that right now. They don't have that great defense. The defense made some great plays in the first half, but it's a defense that's injured. They've been hurt all year long. Nick Bosa had an amazing game. Nick Bosa, fantastic. Just was out there doing what Nick Bosa does. But other than that, there was a couple of great plays by Green. I think that, you saw Fred Warner being Fred Warner, but the defense definitely allowed this number one offense in the NFL, something that every defense has done all year, allowed them to score a lot of points. Brock Purdy wasn't going to be able to keep that up because, as you said, he made a couple of bad throws. The pass to Kittle, that was 8 yards over his head. I mean, that was never going to be completed. They're lucky that the guy tackled him, and it wasn't 3 picks in this football game. But with Brock Purdy, man, you can really see the good, and then you can really see the bad. And for me, when he got hurt at the end, too, it just really – it brought that red flag back up because it's like this guy's been in the league for essentially 2.5 years, right? He didn't start till tail end of his rookie season, and he got hurt, right? And he got hurt the next year as well, and he's been hurt again. I feel like with Brock Purdy, he keeps getting injured, and it's there. The one was big in the NFC Championship game, but since then it's been like a little thing here and a little thing there, and maybe this is why he dropped towards the end. Of the draft, the very end of the draft, because he doesn't have that 6'5" build. He's not 240. He's not this huge specimen of a human being, and he can be a little bit fragile. And so you gotta think about that. You gotta weigh that in if you're talking about a long-term franchise quarterback where you're going to give him hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, can his body take the beating? Can he be that guy? And before we get too far off this, you mentioned Jake Moody. And you mentioned guys making parlays. Well, a buddy of mine before the game was like, hey, let me go over this parlay with you real quick. He's going. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. And he had Jake Moody making 1.5 field goals. I was like, ooh, I don't know about that, man. I don't know. He's like, yeah, but I think, the 49ers stall in the red zone. He's going to make some kicks. I was like, I hope so. I hope he makes the kicks after he missed the first one. I had to text him. I was like, oh, man, the Moody's back. And then he missed the second one, too. And I was just like, I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry you lost your whole parlay on this bad kicker because, yeah, they probably don't cut him right now, right? Because there's one game left in the season. They probably don't get rid of him. They bring him back for one more game. But he's not their kicker next season, right? It just can't happen, Croc.
Nah. And part of him, what he's supposed to bring is having a big leg. They tried the 58-yard field goal. Obviously, he missed that. And just this year, it's been very up and down with Jake Moody. So definitely someone I don't foresee either the 49ers bring him back, and if they do bring him back, there's going to be a legit competition. I saw on social media some people talking about, well, if Sam Darnold was so good, he would have beat out Brock Purdy last season. I'm like, there was never a competition between
Mm-mm.
those guys. Like your QB1 was your QB1. It was always going to be Brock Purdy. There was no other conversation about that. There was a QB competition, but it was with the second and third string guy and who
Yep.
the 49ers were ultimately going to keep. They went with Sam Darnold, and he's doing well over there with Minnesota. But Brock Purdy, there's still some things to talk about with him, and kind of breaking down one play that a lot of people are discussing. Kyle Shanahan talked about a little bit about maybe a disguise coverage. We're going to get to that. Also, Kyle Shanahan, his job he's doing as the head coach, and should he be on the hot seat moving forward? All that and more. Keep it locked right here. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. All right, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on your regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets. If you're just, $5, put that down and your bet can potentially win. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. All right. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. All right. And if you're like me, I'm 49ers game. There's college football on right now as we're recording this. The Alabama Crimson Tide are playing. You got games coming on a little bit. I think the Washington Huskies, they're coming on. A lot of college football action, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel. All right, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment from FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. We talked about breaking down Brock Purdy and one of his interceptions, and there's a lot of talk about it. One thing that Brock Purdy does very well, I think I like to talk about players' superpower. All right. You have the Patrick Mahomes of the world, the Josh Allens of the world. You have, guys like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, his superpower is just being able to make something out of nothing. I mean, he's just so elusive in space. He can rip off a 50-yard run just as easily as he can rip off a 50-yard pass, right? Like, Josh Allen, a rocket arm. So sometimes if he's late, he could still be on time because that ball is going to jump out of his hand and get there. And there are a few other guys that have some big, powerful arms, power throwers in the NFL, like the Herberts. Well, with Brock Purdy, that's not his thing. Brock Purdy, his superpower is literally his mind. He was the last pick in the NFL draft for a reason. Physically, he's barely at that bar. He's barely at that bar. So you know that there are some limitations physically with what Brock can give you, but that mind, that's his superpower. He's always been able to do a really good job of play on time. He understands when to get the ball out. He finds the answers for Kyle Shanahan. Kyle calls the plays. Brock is able to execute because of his mind and how he sees the field. A lot of times sees it the way that Kyle Shanahan wants him to see it. Well, on his second interception thrown into Kirby Joseph, he did not see the field very well. Kyle Shanahan gave him the brief explanation of it later where he's like, it's kind of this inverted defense. And, Purdy saw him in the middle of the field, thought he was a deep third safety. You hear Kyle say that, and then the fans start echoing it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I will give it to you if you tell me, hey, this guy disguised the coverage, pre-snap, he's single high, right? So you're thinking, oh, that's a deep third safety. Cool, I'll give you that. But when you snap the ball, and this is part of where Purdy either is good or has to get better at because this is part of his superpower. When you snap the ball and the safety is still standing there and does not take a step back at all, he, at least in my opinion, is no longer a deep third safety. So whatever coverage I thought he was in, he's not in that. And there's different ways to disguise coverages. I know with my guys, we might show cover two. You show two high safeties. And then if we're going cover three or man robber, we'll rotate that safety. You got your post safety. You got the other guy coming down to a hook curl, right? So there are different ways to disguise it. But when I see a guy in the middle, what I'm looking at, does he stay there? Does he bail to a deep half? Oh, no. Okay, he's going to go backwards. Oh, he doesn't take a step backwards. I cannot throw the dig to a squatting safety who's in the middle of the field. So that right there, we're talking about disguising things. There wasn't much disguise when post-snap the guy standing in the exact same spot. So those are areas right there where I feel like Brock Purdy, there's still some growing going on. And I don't know. This is the issue with some of these guys. There was talk about Mac Jones. Like, all right, well, Mac Jones, super efficient quarterback, but how much better is he going to get? With Brock, do you think we potentially seen the best version of Brock? And with the elbow injury concerns popping up, he's getting an MRI. We'll know more about it by tomorrow's episode. Does the injury with this elbow worry you moving forward with him?
I mean, it has to a little bit, right? I mean, they said, oh, doesn't have anything to do with the UCL. It's what did Kyle call it? Some nerve stuff. I mean, that sounds like he's kind of brushing it off, but it's got to worry you when Purdy says it felt like my hand was on fire. Like, that's not good. It didn't even look like a big hit, but with nerves and things like that, like it could take the tiniest little, pinch and all of a sudden you can't move your hand. Right. So again, I mentioned it earlier with Purdy. It's the injuries that are starting to pile up. This is now the third one that I can remember that is probably going to cost him some time. He's probably not going to play. And to get back to the interception, the second one, like all he had to do was take a peek at the safety. He did not take a peek. He was staring down his receiver the entire time. Like you said, he saw the pre-snap read and he's like, oh, I'm good. It's like the tiniest little peek to your left, and you would know that pass was not open. So it's the little things like that I do think Brock can get better at. I don't think we've seen the best Brock Purdy. He muscled up a little bit, and I did see a little bit more zip on his fastball this year than last year and in his rookie season. So I do think there's quite a room for improvement when it comes to a guy like Brock Purdy, because I don't think he's going to lose that brain of his, right? I think he understands exactly what Kyle wants from him, where his guys are going to be. He knows exactly where his guys are going to be. He's got that layered throw down. Like he's got a lot of talent and a lot of potential to take another big step forward. We saw in the deep pass to Pearsall to the right side when Pearsall was wide open that he fluttered it a little bit. And Pearsall kind of had to slow down and come back for it. If he leads him, that's a touchdown, right? But he didn't quite get everything on it. Like things like that, Brock can get better at. He can definitely improve his game. I think he will improve his game. He seems like the type of guy that will spend the entire offseason trying to get better, because you come in, you're the last pick of the draft, you want to prove something. Brock has proven something. He has proven that he belongs in the NFL. He's a legit NFL starter. Is he top 10? I think he's close. I think he's right on that precipice, right, of guys where I don't think there are 10 guys right now in the NFL that I would take ahead of Brock Purdy. But do I want to pay him that kind of money? That's where it gets really tough for me, because you got a lot of aging veterans next year that are on big contracts. You're going to have to invest some money in that offensive line. As you heard the guys talk about it last night, if you watched that Monday night game, they were constantly talking about this patchwork offensive line. This guy, who's this guy? Well, this guy was on the practice squad last week, stuff like that. The Niners are going to need to invest some money elsewhere, not just in the quarterback position. So a lot of questions still to be answered for this 49er team. Is Brock Purdy the quarterback for this team going forward? He can be at the right number.
That's going to be the big conversation throughout this offseason. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it a ton. What is the right number for him? Because for a lot of these guys, you see what Tua got, and you see what Jordan Love got, and if I'm Brock Purdy, it's like, well, why wouldn't I get around the ballpark of what these guys are getting? $55+ million per year. And one thing that I've been very bullish on is I get what these guys are making, but I'm not going to pigeonhole my team into that spot where I'm paying this guy a bunch of money more than I ideally want to. I don't love it. Even watching Jordan Love this year, if I'm the Packers, if I'm a Packers fan, you're just hoping, hey, I'm hoping he gets better. I'm hoping he improves. I hope he returns back to more what we saw from him the second half of the 2023 season. Tua, you're watching him, and it's like, this is what he is. You probably don't feel comfortable paying him in that amount. Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars, you're probably watching him and saying, I don't feel comfortable paying him that. So do you say, well, this is the going rate for guys, so we're just going to pay you this, and then the whole time you're judging him based on a guy that's making an excessive amount of money? Or do you go more the Baker Mayfield route, right, where, hey, I'm making $40, $42, $43 million a year, and based on my play, I'm justifying making that amount of money. Like, you feel real. I bet the Tampa Bay Buccaneers feel really good about paying him 42, 43, $45 million, right? And
Yep.
he just, matter of fact, he just won me my fantasy league through 5 touchdowns Sunday. So shout out to Baker Mayfield. I'm a fan of Baker, but how he's playing has them saying, man, we love that we're paying him this. Now, if they bump that number up to $55, $60 million, would they still be as comfortable with Baker's like, oh, we're kind of sneaking into the playoffs because we're playing the NFC South. It's not a good division right now. Probably feel like you're overpaying him a little bit. And with Brock, I think there are definitely better days ahead of him. But you start having a little injury here and there. And a lot of people are talking about the 49ers as if it's just like, oh, like he's not playing with anybody. He's playing with a first-round rookie receiver who is talented. He's playing with George Kittle, the best tight end in football right now. Just went over 1,000 yards for the 4th time in his career. You know, you're playing with Deebo Samuel, who clearly has been a shell of himself, but here and there he can have a big game. Still got Nick Bosa, who had a big game on the defensive side of the ball, and some rookies doing some things. So the 49ers clearly aren't a juggernaut, but are they a team that still you could look at and say, man, this team should have at least 8-9 wins right now, right? Like they're not the 13, 14 win team or, what we're seeing from the Minnesota Vikings, and you don't have that expectations of them because of the injuries that they have. But 6 wins, I feel like regardless, it's a little inexcusable, especially since you have, your starting quarterback in every game but one throughout this year. So that's the part right there where I think there's enough guys surrounding him to where you should have more than 6 wins.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a team like Arizona, right? They shelled out a ton of money for Kyler Murray, and they've got 7 wins right now. You look at a team like Jacksonville. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. Like they invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this young man, and they're not winning any football games. The Giants did it with Daniel Jones. Like you could throw a bunch of money at a quarterback and be like, he's our guy. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win football games. So you got to be smart with it, and hopefully the number can be the right number for both Brock and for the 49ers next year, because I'd love to see him, long-term as a 49er. But if he's looking for $60 million, let somebody else pay it.
Let somebody else play. And that's, it's kind of playing roulette right there. I just watched the new Squid Game, and they were doing like this roulette gun game, crazy stuff. But kind of playing Russian roulette with this quarterback position. You kind of got to have an answer or somebody that you're confident with if you do decide to play hardball with Brock Purdy. But I think we're probably a year, maybe 2 away from the hardball conversation. We are going to talk more about the 49ers and should they be playing hardball with Kyle Shanahan, head coach. We can discuss that and more next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by PrizePicks, and it's playoff time. And if you are like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes into play. All right, if you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching these games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash without daily fantasy player projections. All right, with PrizePicks, you can simply pick more or less on player stats. It's like totally passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you are looking for a flex play or something to boost your payout, or you want cash out quickly, PrizePicks has you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. All right, I play daily fantasy all the time with PrizePicks, and hey, maybe I want to put some money on with Jared Goff and kind of combine him with Saquon Barkley and see what that's going to look like. Those guys are on a tear right now, and you can win you some money doing that. So here's a special offer from Locked On NFL 49er listeners right now. Download the app today and use promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Kyle Shanahan.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about being on the hot seat a little bit. And, there's been some numbers kind of floating out there with Kyle. And I think as a head coach, if 49ers fired him today, he'd have a job by tomorrow, right? Like there might be some teams that aren't even looking for a head coach, but because he's available, they say, you know what, let's fire our coach and bring in Kyle. He's a good guy. And we've seen him when he has his guys out there, he has his pieces. This is a guy that is going to lead his team to a deep playoff run, if not a Super Bowl appearance, which we've seen twice now. But the interesting thing is that in his 8 seasons coaching the 49ers, he's had 4 losing seasons. And that either matches or is more than some of the top coaches in the league who have been coaching since the early 2010s or 2000s, right? So ideally, you don't want the lows that we've seen from the 49ers. You could see guys like Mike Tomlin. He has never had a losing season under, with Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, he ain't won many playoff games lately. He does have the one Super Bowl win, but his teams, at the very least, they're always competitive. And I think I would take the deep playoff runs and Super Bowl appearances over not winning a playoff game in several years. But with Kyle, there hasn't been much in between. It's like, hey, we're either all in and we're really good and we go far, or we're just out and we're talking about the draft at the end of December. So Kyle right now, he has to bank on his players coming back, being healthy, and guys that are much older being able to stay healthy for an entire season next year. If the season starts weird because Trent Williams is older, CMC is older, especially in running back years, and they age like dogs. You got Ayuk coming back from an injury. Debo hasn't been great this year. What's he going to look like moving forward? A lot of guys that the 49ers are kind of banking on to turn this thing around next year, they're older or coming off injuries or both. So when you look at Kyle, and if this potentially starts off weird, you think this is a guy that's potentially going to be on the hot seat?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say because if you really look at Kyle's resume with the 49ers, right, his first couple of years, those were rebuild years. He took over a bad franchise that had 3 or 4 years where you're just like, oh, God, I'm a 49er fan. This is going to be rough. So you kind of got to put those on the back burner. See, maybe two bad seasons. And during those seasons, there were a lot of injuries. I mean, it just happens. And I know it happens in the NFL. I know the Lions are going through it and they're still putting it up right now, right? But when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, when you get those winning seasons, those 4 winning seasons, those are 4 NFC championship games. So he knows how to win the football games that really matter. When Tomlin took over in Pittsburgh from Bill Cowher, he didn't leave an empty cupboard, right? He had a good football team that Tomlin wrote, right? And I'm not saying Mike Tomlin's not a good coach. Mike Tomlin's a great coach. No losing seasons. Like, that's incredible what he's done there in Pittsburgh. With Kyle Shanahan, I think he's a bit of a roller coaster, right? And I think if you want to get those high highs, you're going to have the low lows. That's just the nature of how a roller coaster works. And for Kyle Shanahan, if he does put together a rough start to the season and it's, bad play calls after bad play calls, guys that he insists on backing, and I believe in this guy and he's not doing it, maybe he does get on the hot seat. I don't think it's a hot seat enough next year where if he has another season like this that he's fired. But I do think that people would seriously start asking the question next year. People that are asking it right now are spoiled, is how I want to put it, because we've become spoiled as 49er fans. We expect NFC championships. We expect playoffs. We expect Super Bowl runs. I get it. That's what I expect too. But we got to be realists about this thing. The NFL is a tough game to play, man. They play with an oblong ball that bounces in weird ways, and guys get hurt and miss the whole season. We didn't even mention Hargrave, their number 1 defensive lineman out there who missed the whole season, right? This is a team that has been bit over and over by the injury bug, and it sucks. It really does. But you go into a season next year, you talk about some older guys coming back. You talk about maybe having to play hardball with Purdy. Do you bring in a Kirk Cousins? If Aaron Rodgers is cut, do you bring in an Aaron Rodgers? Do you bring in someone like that and kind of try to go the route that the Rams took recently with Matthew Stafford of like, look, we got this team, we got this core. Maybe the one piece we're missing is this veteran quarterback who's been there, who's done it, who knows how to get things done. And Kyle, we know his crush on Cousins, and Aaron Rodgers has a Super Bowl win. Like, I'm not saying that's the route to go, but I would not be surprised if 49ers did something like that in the offseason.
Kirk Cousins may be some sort of an insurance policy, not playing well right now. And I heard some numbers being thrown out there. I think in his last 6 games or something like that, he's thrown 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions, or 9 interceptions. Bad. He's like just something like ridiculous where it's like this guy, he might just be washed. And it's tough to watch that. I watched the show Quarterbacks, and you watch Kirk Cousins and how he prepared. It's like, man, I'm a fan. That made me a fan of Kirk Cousins, a guy who I didn't give a damn about prior to that, but you just see him and how hard he works and how tough he is. And I can see all the things that probably Kyle Shanahan saw in him, what Kyle likes, but Kyle has to understand Kyle, this ain't the same version of Kirk Cousins that you grew to like and love. But, bringing him to the 49ers, if he gets let go, which I think we all can kind of see that happening, they're going to have to eat a lot of money. The Falcons will still be paying for him. So if 49ers could do kind of a Pittsburgh Steelers Russell Wilson thing where, the Broncos are paying a bulk of Russell Wilson's contract. The Steelers, they're paying them like, I don't know, what, $1.5 million,
Yeah,
$2
nothing.
million. It's like the super vet minimum contract. And I think the 49ers could do something like that with Kirk Cousins, where, hey, you come in here, you are the backup. Kirk Cousins is Brock Purdy is our guy. But I do think that gives the 49ers a chance to just say, all right, Brock, last year was really weird. It was up and down, had a lot of injuries. It didn't work out the way we wanted. Let's just see how this season goes. And maybe they throw out a contract to him, an offer. Maybe the offer is lower. Maybe the offer is along what you and I are thinking, $45 million. And maybe Purdy says, hell no, I will not sign that. All
Maybe
right.
he holds out,
Now, if
right?
he holds out, it's tough. And at least you got
Then you
Kirk.
got Kirk Cousins, though, waiting, ready to go.
How? Now, this is the tough thing, all right? And we'll get into a lot of the contract talk in the offseason. But if you are Brock and Kyle brings in Kirk Cousins at a super vet minimum, and they throw you a contract offer, which clearly, it's low. It's below what Tua and those guys are playing. But this is what we feel comfortable with offering you right now. And I'm pretty sure his agent's like, don't sign that. Do you hold out and potentially watch Kirk Cousins do well with the 49ers?
Right. And maybe lead him to the playoffs or to a Super Bowl. And then
Oh,
all of a sudden you're waiting next year for that big contract and it doesn't come again. I mean, there's a lot to be said for Brock Purdy maybe being like, hey, you know what? I got a pretty good here in this Kyle Shanahan offense. Maybe I do take a little bit of a break. Or wait, or should I go sign a big, massive contract with the Cleveland Browns or something? Like, come on. Come on. I don't think we see something like that. I think that bringing in a veteran at a low rate does put a little bit of pressure on Brock, which I think is a good thing.
I think that brings out competition in everyone.
Yep.
And speaking of competition, we'll end on this. Thoughts on Ricky Pearsall? Had a breakout game.
Yeah, he looked great. I mean, that you mentioned that one-handed catch, that was beautiful. He looked good in space. He was running the ball. He even tried to throw the ball once. Like, I like seeing that. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of these young guys getting snaps, building up their confidence heading into next year, because next week doesn't mean anything. So maybe we see a little bit more cowering. I mean, maybe, stuff like that. I want to see the young guys out there. I want to see him performing. Pearsall looked like the first-round draft pick the 49ers want him to be. So hopefully that rolls over into next season.
I think the numbers he put up in this game, was total what he had done for the previous, however many games he played this season leading up to it. So, big time performance by Ricky Pearsall. And then, got everybody to see this guy's talented and he fits in this offense with what the 49ers will be asking him to do moving forward. And I think you may see him in the big role next year, next to Brandon Ayuk. Not sure if Debo is going to be retained. We'll see how they work out that whole contract negotiation, but that is a conversation for the offseason. Do we have any punter watch from last night? Did the 49ers punt?
No, neither did the Lions. It was one of those crazy games where there was no punts. So, no, he was out there holding for Moody. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe because he doesn't have Wishnowsky holding for him. That's why Moody's missing all these kicks.
And something like that could be the difference.
Be
and
hey,
audience, you guys can be the difference too. Make sure you guys like this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. And on all the platforms, make sure you guys go and leave a review. We definitely want to thank you for making Locked On 49ers your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen of the day, go watch or listen to Locked On Now and plenty of other podcasts on the Locked On Network. Obviously, as you guys noticed, there is no Brian Peacock right now. You guys just say a prayer for him and his family. And until then, we're going to keep holding it down right here, Locked On 49ers. See y'all tomorrow. Peace.
See you.